anesthetized mice with small identical cuts and divided into groups. Estebany treated one group by holding their cages for 15 minutes twice a day, touching no animal directly. Ordinary volunteers with no claimed gift held the cages of a second group. A third group healed its own. Under blinded conditions, the wounds of Estebany's mice closed significantly faster than the wounds of every control group, and the ordinary volunteers produced no such effort. Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott, and today we're going to talk about the secret of healing with your hands by doing a deep dive on the forgotten man known as Sidney Weltmer, who convinced the Supreme Court to admit publicly that the mind can heal the body, and studied this healing process in such great detail. It's surprising we never talk about him. Now let me take you back. A man is carried into a room in a great house on the Missouri prairie because his legs no longer carry him. His name hardly matters now. He's one of thousands. For 3 years, a paralysis has crept up his body from the legs, and the finest doctors in Chicago have run out of answers, until a specialist finally spoke the sentence that ends all hope. Nothing more can be done. Make him comfortable. So his family spent the last of their savings on train tickets to a small town almost nobody had heard of, chasing a rumor, chasing a name whispered between the desperate across the whole country. Now he lies on a table, thin and gray, and certain he is finished. A door opens. In walks a man, unhurried, ordinary, a former country preacher, with calm eyes and a steady voice. And he does something no doctor in Chicago ever did. He sits down close and regards the dying man with the calm certainty of someone gazing on a person already restored to full health. Then he lays his hands on him. No medicine enters the room, no needle, no knife, no tonic, no prayer book even. Only 2 warm hands resting on a ruined body, and a quiet voice speaking with absolute conviction, telling the man that life is moving back into his legs, that strength is returning, that the sickness is leaving him this very hour. The voice never wavers, carrying no trace of doubt, no hint of maybe. It speaks of the man's recovery as a settled fact, a sunrise already on its way, certain and only waiting to be seen. Days pass. The hands return, the voice returns, the unshakable certainty returns. And then, on a morning the man will remember for the rest of his life, a toe moves, then a foot. Gripping the edge of the table with shaking arms, a man who was carried into that house 3 weeks earlier rises and stands and takes a single trembling step across the floor on legs the doctor had pronounced dead. He will tell that story until the day he dies. Thousands of others will carry home their own versions of it, and their telling will fill the trains that pour into one small Missouri town day after day, every passenger chasing the same impossible promise, where every known disease is cured without medicine or surgery. The man with the hands called himself a healer. Newspapers crowned him the Wizard of the West. To the doctors, he was a fraud. To the clergy, a blasphemer. And to the United States government, a criminal it moved to destroy. The fight that followed climbed all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, where 9 justices were forced to answer a question that should never have reached a courtroom at all. Can a man truly heal the human body with nothing but his hands, his words, and the power of the mind? This is the story of Sidney Weltmer, the secret he built an empire upon, and the strange afternoon when the highest court in America looked at the healing power of the mind and admitted it had no way to prove it false. Every healer carries an origin wound, and Sidney Weltmer carried his from boyhood. He came into this world on July 7th, 1858 in Wooster, Ohio, and while he was still young, his family carried him west to the rolling farm country of Morgan County, Missouri. The boy grew up hungry for knowledge in a place with little of it to spare. He borrowed medical books, wherever he could find them, and read them by lamplight, apprenticing himself for a time to a country doctor, dreaming of a life spent mending the human body. Money and circumstance closed that door, so the young man turned toward the other great calling available to an ambitious mind on the frontier, and he gave himself to the church. At 19, Weltmer stood ordained as a Baptist minister. He preached across several Missouri towns, a young man with a powerful voice and a gift for moving a room. Yet the old fascination with healing refused to leave him. Again and again, he returned to a handful of verses in his Bible, reading them over until they burned. In the Gospel of Mark, the risen Christ tells his followers that believers will lay hands on the sick, and the sick shall recover. The Gospel of Matthew promised that two people who agree together in focused conviction receive whatever they ask. Weltmer read those lines as an instruction rather than a comfort, a doorway rather than a decoration. Then came the test that made the man. Weltmer fell ill with tuberculosis, the great killer of his century, a wasting disease of the lungs that medicine could neither cure nor reliably slow. A diagnosis of consumption in those years carried the weight of a sentence. By his own telling, Weltmer turned the full force of his mind against the illness. He held a fixed and unshakable conviction of his own recovery. He disciplined his thoughts away from fear, and he refused to accept the verdict written across every medical text he had ever read. And he recovered. The lungs that the medical books had marked for the grave began to clear. Slowly the wasting reversed. Whatever process unfolding inside that failing body, the young preacher watched himself climb back from a death the textbooks had promised him, and the experience rewrote the center of his life. However we explain what happened inside that young man's lungs, he walked away from the experience carrying a certainty that would organize the rest of his life. He had stood at the edge of death, applied nothing but the disciplined power of his own mind and spirit, and lived. If the mind could pull a body back from tuberculosis, Weltmer reasoned then, the mind held a power the doctors had overlooked entirely. A power that could be studied, a power that could be taught, a power the preacher in him whispered that could be a calling and a business both. To understand what Weltmer built, we travel back a little further to a current of ideas already moving through the American mind. A century before, an Austrian physician named Franz Anton Mesmer had stunned the courts of Europe with a theory he called animal magnetism. Mesmer taught that an invisible fluid flowed through all living things, and that a skilled practitioner could direct that fluid with passes of the hands, restoring the sick to balance. His patients fell into trances, convulsed, and rose claiming to feel healed. The medical authorities of his day denounced him, yet the phenomenon he stumbled into refused to disappear. That trance state would eventually earn a new name, hypnosis, born from the root of his own. The word mesmerize still carries his name through our language. By the late 19th century, Mesmer's fluid had emerged with a deeply American invention. The New Thought movement is homegrown spiritual philosophy holding that thought shapes reality, that the mind influences the body, and that a person aligned with the divine power within could reshape health and fortune alike. New Thought filled lecture halls across the country. It carried the early seeds of everything we now call the law of attraction and the science of manifestation. Figures across the movement taught that a person's dominant mental state radiated outward into their circumstances, that disease itself often began in the mind and could be unwound there. A Maine clockmaker named Phineas Quimby had pioneered mental healing decades earlier, treating patients by shifting their beliefs about their own bodies, and his ideas rippled outward into a whole generation of healers. Weltmer drank deeply from that well. At the exact crossroads of these streams, he took his stand. He took the laying on of hands from his Bible, the magnetic passes from Mesmer, the trance of the hypnotist, and the mind power philosophy of New Thought, and he fused them into a single system. His own name for it was Suggestive Therapeutics. though the world would come to call it simply Weltmerism. The method ran on three forces braided together. First, the healer placed his hands upon the patient, channeling what Weltmer described as a healing magnetism. Second, the healer spoke, planting suggestions of wellness directly into the patient's receptive mind. And underneath both, the patient was guided toward a fixed conviction of recovery, the same unshakable belief Weltmer credited for his own escape from the grave. In 1897, the 19th of February, Weltmer joined with a partner named Joseph Kelly and opened for business in Nevada, Missouri. They started small, working out of borrowed rooms. Word traveled fast. Within a year, the demand had grown so fierce they took over a grand 17-room mansion built by a railroad contractor, and the Weltmer Institute of Suggestive Therapeutics was truly born. A 10-day course of treatment cost $100, a sum that represents months of wages for a working family. Consider what the price reveals. A working family might earn $100 across 3 or 4 months of hard labor, and yet the sick handed it over for 10 days of treatment, sight unseen, on the strength of a reputation carried by word of mouth and newspaper advertisements. Desperation drove some of them. Genuine conviction drove others. The unshakable sense planted before they ever boarded the train that the man in Nevada could give them back their lives. That conviction, as we will see, was the active ingredient. You can certainly learn more about this from 2 videos I've created, Healing with Your Hands and another deep dive on Sidney Weltmer I did earlier on the channel. In the Healing with Hands episode, I read about the ancient technique of healing with hands that's taught by ancient Hawaiian priests called Lomi Lomi. This is a tradition that can be found in multiple different areas through ancient teachings thousands of years before. As it is, it's mentioned in the Bible. So going back to Weltmer, what happened over the next several years reads as the rise of a frontier kingdom built entirely out of belief. The Institute became a phenomenon without parallel in American healing. On its busiest days, the staff treated several hundred patients, working them through the great mansion in shifts. Weltmer hired and trained a small army to keep pace with the demand. 17 healers laying on hands, a roster of assistant healers, a resident physician to lend medical respectability, and well over 100 stenographers and typists clattering away at the correspondence. He built an auditorium that seated hundreds and filled it with his lectures. For the crowds who gathered to hear his gospel of the healing mind, he sponsored a traveling quartet, the Weltmer Quartet. The mail order arm of the business may have been the true engine of the empire. A person who could never afford the train fare to Missouri could still send a letter and a fee and receive in return a course of absent treatment, with Weltmer and the patient agreeing to fix their thoughts on healing at precise hours arranged by mail. Books and pamphlets flowed out by the thousands. Weltmer published a magazine. He wrote volumes with titles that reveal the dual nature of the man with perfect clarity, healing tracts beside a business manual frankly titled, How to Make Magnetic Healing Pay. The advertisements crowned him with a name that stuck. They called him the Wizard of the West, printing his portrait beside the faces of Edison and Lincoln and Caesar, selling the promise that every known disease could be cured without medicine or surgery. Testimonials poured back from grateful patients. A young man healed of a creeping paralysis in 17 days. A child lifted out of infantile paralysis in a matter of weeks. Asthma, addiction, chronic pain, nervous disorders, even insanity, all of it, the Institute claimed, yielding to the touch of the hands and the power of suggestion. By 1903, the operation claimed to have reached 75,000 patients. The figure staggers the mind, even allowing for promotional exaggeration. A single self-taught healer in a Missouri farm town had built a healing operation that rivaled the reach of a major hospital. Run almost entirely on touch, suggestion, and the printed word. Money flowed in faster than the staff could count it, and the Institute became the largest employer and the proudest landmark in Nevada. The town of Nevada transformed around him. A modest farm community became a destination, the railroad adding trains to its schedule, the post office swelling so with mail that the government raised it to first class and built a larger one, its hotels and shops multiplying to serve the endless tide of the hopeful and the desperate. Sidney Weltmer, the sickly boy who taught himself medicine from borrowed books, had become one of the most famous healers in the United States, presiding over a mansion of miracles on the Missouri prairie. And fame on that scale always summons its enemies. 3 forces turned against Weltmer at once, and each had its own reason to want to destroy him. The doctors came first, and their anger ran hot. Those years marked the very moment when American medicine fought to professionalize itself, to draw a hard line between the licensed physician and the swarm of healers, herbalists, and magnetic practitioners working the margins. Weltmer, untrained and self-taught, drawing hundreds of paying patients a day with nothing but his hands and his voice, stood as a living insult to everything organized medicine wished to become. One physician, Preston Pope, published a furious pamphlet, The Expose of Weltmerism, branding the whole enterprise as chicanery and money getting dressed up in spiritual language. The Missouri Medical Association denounced him. To the doctors, Weltmer was a thief stealing patients who belonged in real clinics, and worse, a dangerous man steering the gravely ill away from genuine treatment. The clergy came second, and their objection cut in a different direction. Here sat a former Baptist minister quoting the words of Christ to sell a healing method for cash, and to many men of the cloth, that fusion reeked of blasphemy. They watched him take the laying of hands, a sacred act of faith, and turn it into a $100 product line, braiding the gospel together with mesmerism and trance, practices that carried to their ears the whiff of the occult. A holy gift in their judgment had been dragged into the marketplace and dressed in a wizard's robes. Weltmer wrapped his work in scripture, quoting Christ and promising healing in the language of faith, and a number of ministers found that intolerable. A Methodist pastor publicly branded Weltmer and his assistants miserable charlatans, accusing them of perverting the gospel into a money machine. To those critics, a man selling the laying on of hands for a $100 course had turned sacred healing into a carnival, and his blend of mesmerism and mind power struck them as something closer to occultism than Christianity. The competitors came third and quietest. Weltmer's success had spawned imitators across the region, and his fame had made him the largest target in a crowded and lucrative field. Behind several of the complaints that reached Washington sat business rivals who stood to profit handsomely if the giant of Nevada, Missouri could be cut down. Weltmer fought back with the defiance of a man certain of himself. When the Methodist pastor called him a charlatan in print, Weltmer sued him for libel. The case climbed to the Supreme Court, and there it turned against him on a single devastating fact. One of the cases held up as proof of his power involved a woman who believed his mailed letters had cured her of breast cancer, the two of them agreeing to focus their healing thoughts at appointed times. During the very period of that supposed long-distance treatment, the evidence showed Weltmer was vacationing in Colorado, and the intimate healing letters had been written and mailed by clerks at the Institute. The court ruled that libel law offered no shelter to a man in the practice of an illegal business. Weltmer had lost his first great legal battle, and a far larger one was already bearing down on him. In the spring of 1900, the most powerful enemy of all entered the fight. The United States government moved to destroy Sidney Weltmer by cutting the artery that fed his empire. It went after his mail. On the 15th of May, the Postmaster General of the United States issued a fraud order against the American School of Magnetic Healing, the formal name under which Weltmer and Kelly operated. The order declared on evidence the postmaster found satisfactory that the Institute was running a scheme to obtain money through the mails by false and fraudulent pretense. Its mechanism was brutal in its simplicity. Every letter addressed to the Institute would be seized, stamped with the word fraudulent across its face without ever being opened, and returned to whoever had sent it. Each postal money order would be refused and sent back. The flood of 3,000 daily letters carrying well over $1,000 a day in checks and cash would be choked off at a single stroke. For a business built on the mail, this was a death blow, aimed straight at the heart. No mail meant no patients, no payments, no books sold, no absent treatments arranged. The Postmaster General, a single federal official, had appointed himself judge and executioner, deciding on his own authority that Weltmerism was a lie, and that the United States Post Office would refuse to carry its correspondence one day longer. Weltmer understood at once that his entire life stood on the line, and he made a decision that would echo far past his own story. Rather than quietly close his doors, he sued the United States government. He traveled to Washington to fight the order at its source, tending even to his clients among the wives of senators while the case worked its way upward. Sharp lawyers built him an argument that reached past his own peculiar trade and touched on something fundamental. The question, his lawyers argued, was who held the power to decide what counted as truth? Could a single government official, with no trial and no jury, declare a healing method false and strangle a lawful business on the strength of his own opinion? The lower courts sided with the government and dismissed his complaint. Weltmer appealed and lost again, so he carried his fight to the only place left, the Supreme Court of the United States. In October of 1902, the highest court in the land agreed to weigh whether the mind can heal the body, and whether the government may punish a man for claiming that it can. The case carried the cumbersome name American School of Magnetic Healing versus McAnulty being the local postmaster enforcing the order. Beneath the dry legal title sat one of the strangest questions ever to reach the marble chamber. 9 justices of the Supreme Court would rule on whether the power of mind over body amounts to a fact or a fraud. The stakes ran far past one healer's mail. If the government could brand Weltmer's claims a fraud and seize his correspondence, then the same power could reach any unconventional healer, any unpopular church, any seller of an idea a federal official happened to disbelieve. The case had quietly become a test of how much authority a single bureaucrat held over the beliefs that Americans could buy and sell through the mail. Now you can see why this particular case is so important today. On its face, the government's position seems strong. Weltmer promised cures, money changed hands, and many of those cures could never be proven. To the post office, that arrangement was fraud in its plainest form. The sale of a result no one could guarantee, and that often failed to arrive. Surely, the government argued, a man who takes payment for healing tuberculosis and insanity by waving his hands and mailing letters of suggestion is precisely the kind of swindler the anti-fraud laws were written to stop. Weltmer's lawyers answered with an argument of unexpected depth. They declined to ask the court to certify that Weltmerism worked, and posed a sharper question instead. The mind's influence over the body, they argued, sits in a vast territory of genuine uncertainty, a region where even sober and educated people disagree, and no government clerk possessed a measuring stick precise enough to mark the boundary between a bold claim and a criminal lie. Those fraud statutes, they insisted, were written to punish provable falsehoods, the lottery that pays no winners, the gold mine that holds no gold. They were never meant to let a postmaster settle a live scientific and philosophical debate by stamping one side of it fraudulent. On the 17th of November 1902, the Supreme Court handed down its decision, and by a vote of 6-2, it sided with the healer against the government. Justice Rufus Peckham, writing for the majority, set down words that deserve to be far better known than they are. He acknowledged plainly that the influence of the mind upon the body is very powerful, that a hopeful mental state goes far to alleviate and even to help cure the illnesses a body suffers, and that nature itself heals a great many ills when the mind supports it. The exact extent of that power, Peckham wrote, no one can accurately say. One person may believe it reaches far further than another believes, and a claim that the mind affects the body more profoundly than most educated people would accept could never, for that reason, be branded a fraud. The heart of the ruling rang out. There is, the court declared, no exact standard of absolute truth by which to prove such an assertion false and a fraud, because no one could draw the precise limit of the mind's power over the body. No postmaster could lawfully declare Weltmer a liar and seize his mail. The fraud orders were struck down, mail flowed into the Institute once more, and a self-taught healer from the Missouri prairie had forced the Supreme Court of the United States to look directly at the power of the mind over the body and concede that it was real, that it was significant, and that its limits lay beyond the reach of any one man to measure. The irony sitting at the center of this story runs deep, and it deserves a moment of its own. Sidney Weltmer set out to build a healing empire, and along the way, almost by accident, he became a landmark in the history of American freedom. His victory over the Postmaster General reached far past the world of magnetic healing. The ruling established a powerful principle that a government official may never silence a business or a person merely by declaring their beliefs false, that the suppression of the mail demands more than one bureaucrat's private certainty. Courts cite the case to this day in the defense of free expression and as a check on the arbitrary power of administrative officials. Legal scholars rank the decision among the early building blocks of modern free speech, a moment when the court drew a hard line around the government's official power to declare an idea false and punish those who hold it. The principle reaches far past healing. It shelters the unpopular pamphlet, the fringe newsletter, the unorthodox church, every voice a powerful office might wish to silence by simply refusing to carry its mail. A turn-of-the-century mind healer, dismissed by doctors as a quack, had carved out a piece of the First Amendment that still shelters speech more than a century later. Can you imagine if this case had not gone forward, what YouTube would be like today? What we could actually say and not say on things like YouTube and television? Sit with the strangeness of that. The same method the medical establishment called pure superstition produced a Supreme Court precedent that protects the free flow of ideas through the mail for every American alive today. Whatever Weltmer was, charlatan or healer, or some braided mixture of both, his stubborn refusal to surrender his mail handed the country a lasting gift he never intended to give. History loves this kind of accident. A man fighting for his own pocketbook with no thought of a grand principle ends up bending the law toward freedom for everyone who follows. Weltmer wanted his 3,000 daily letters back, nothing loftier. In reaching for them, he forced the court to rule that opinion, however strange, lies beyond the censor's stamp, and that ruling now shields voices he could never have imagined. The court victory carried the Institute to even greater heights. Vindicated by the highest authority in the land, Weltmer expanded through the first decades of the new century, training healers who scattered across the country and around the world to practice his method. For a span of years, Nevada, Missouri stood as a genuine capital of American mind healing, a prairie town that drew suffering of a continent toward a single mansion and a single pair of hands. We can tell this story honestly only by sitting inside its central tension, because Sidney Weltmer refuses to resolve into a simple hero or a simple fraud. The case against his sincerity is real, and we should look at it squarely. He wrote a book called How to Make Magnetic Healing Pay, a title that reveals a man keenly aware of the money in his miracles. The breast cancer letters that sank his libel suit were written by clerks while he relaxed in Colorado, a fact that sits very poorly beside his image as a devoted healer pouring his spirit into each patient. He advertised with the bombast of a circus, crowned himself the Wizard of the West, and promised the cure of every known disease, a promise no honest healer would keep. The graveyards of that era held many people who chose suggestion over surgery and lost the wager. A clear-eyed look finds plenty of the showman in Sidney Weltmer and plenty of the salesman. And yet, the case of his sincerity refuses to vanish. This was a man who first tested his method on his own dying body, with his own life at stake, long before a single dollar entered the picture. Those who studied him closely, even skeptics, tended to conclude that Weltmer genuinely believed his own teaching, that he was no cold-blooded con man cynically working a mark, but a true believer who had cured himself and burned to share the secret. He grounded his work in scripture. He had loved since boyhood. Free schools rose to teach the method to thousands who would never pay him a cent in patient fees. A pure swindler rarely gives the trick away. Now, the thing that really sticks out to me is how amazing his books were. You can see here in his books, he had very detailed diagrams, and they appear to be very authentically written. As you can see from this book, titled The Practice of Suggestive Therapeutics, it is detailed in its description of how to heal with the hands. I find the book fascinating. I really learned a lot about healing with the hands. More than any other modern healer, Sidney Weltmer's contribution in writing, to me, is very, very sincere and authentic. And the truth almost certainly holds both men at once. Weltmer was a believer who discovered that his belief could be sold, a sincere healer with a showman's instincts, and a businessman's appetite, a man who lived in the wide and shadowed country between the miracle and the racket. The very ambiguity is what makes him endure. He stands as a mirror held up to a question we still struggle to answer, the question of exactly how far the mind can reach into the body and exactly where conviction ends and self-deception begins. Strip away the mansion and the lawsuits and the wizard cape, and a real question remains standing, the question that drew those trains across the prairie in the first place. Was there a secret in Sidney Weltmer's hands? And if there was, what was it? Modern medicine offers an answer that Weltmer himself would have recognized, even as it strips the magic from his magnetism. Science now takes with full seriousness the very forces he built his empire upon. The placebo effect, once dismissed as a quirk, stands today as one of the most robust and studied phenomena in all of medicine. The measurable healing of the body produces when the mind expects to heal. Researchers map the way belief releases the body's own chemistry of relief and repair. They document how a calm and hopeful nervous system strengthens the immune response, lowers the inflammation that drives disease, and creates the bodily conditions in which recovery becomes possible. The reassuring touch of a trusted healer, the confident voice promising wellness, the patient's own fixed expectation of recovery. Every ingredient of Weltmerism turns out to move real machinery inside the human body. Studies of the placebo response now show measurable shifts in the brain chemistry. In fact, studies show that the placebo effect is more effective now than it was in the past. Which is what I'm trying to say, is that the healing of hands is more effective now than it was in 1902. And it also is proven now that brain chemistry can be changed in the release of the body's own pain-relieving compounds and the immune markers and hormone levels, all triggered by nothing more than expectation. A patient who fully believes in a treatment can heal faster than one who doubts, even when the two receive the identical medicine. Belief, the laboratories confirm, writes itself into biology. Weltmer had stumbled through scripture and intuition and his own brush with death onto something genuine. He simply lacked the language we now possess to describe it. When he laid his hands on a sufferer and spoke with absolute conviction of their coming wellness, he was loading the patient's mind with a powerful expectation, and that expectation reached down into the body and went to work. The Supreme Court, with the caution of law rather than the confidence of science, had glimpsed the same truth from a distance. Mind moves body, and the extent of that movement no one can fully measure. A healer who knows how to summon belief holds a real and ancient power, whatever the name the age happens to give it. This is the thread that ties Sidney Weltmer to the work we explore together. Across more than a century, he understood in his own frontier vocabulary that conviction shapes flesh, that the inner state writes itself into the outer condition, that a fixed and faith-filled expectation can call a new reality into being. That same lineage runs through New Thought and into the manifestation teachings of our own day. The lineage that insists the mind is no passive passenger inside the body, but an active force shaping what the body becomes. He practiced it with his hands on the sick in a mansion on the Missouri plains. Now, I don't want you to get the impression that I'm, pulling my nose up and saying that this really isn't a healing method, that it's really only placebo. It's not. My argument is that you can heal with the hands. That is a secret that's been passed down. Now, the argument legally might be, hey, we can't ignore the placebo effect, but I'm telling you that you can heal with the hands and that we can learn how to do this. This moves far beyond the placebo. The easy answer suggests a confident healer creates an expectation. The expectation triggers the body's own pharmacy. The patient recovers. Suggestion moves the real machinery, and the placebo response stands among the most powerful forces in medicine. Yet the answer collapses the moment you follow the evidence past the human mind. Begin at McGill University in the early 60s, where a biologist named Bernard Grad decided to test a Hungarian healer named Oscar Estebany under laboratory control. Grad wounded anesthetized mice with small identical cuts and divided them into groups. Estebany treated one group by holding their cages for 15 minutes twice a day. Touching no animal directly, ordinary volunteers with no claimed gift held the cages of a second group. A third group healed its own. Under blinded conditions, the wounds of Esteban's mice closed significantly faster than the wounds of every control group, and the ordinary volunteers produced no such effort. Mice hold no expectations. A mouse has never heard of magnetic healing, believes nothing about the man holding its cage, and carries no hope of recovery. Whatever passed from Esteban's hands through the metal into those small bodies moved through a channel that expectations could never explain. Grad chose animals for the exact reason. Every objection about suggestion, about hope, about the power of a competent healer over a willing patient dissolves the moment the patient is a mouse in a cage who understands nothing at all. Grad pressed further. He induced goiters in mice through an iodine-poor diet, and the thyroids of the treated animals grew significantly slower than those of the controls. Plants came next. Watering barley seeds with saline that Esteban had held in his hands for 15 minutes, sometimes in a sealed and stopped bottle. Those seeds sprouted faster, grew taller, weighed roughly a quarter more, and carried more chlorophyll than seeds watered with untreated saline. Seeds believed nothing. A sealed bottle of salt water has no faith in its healer. And Sister Justa Smith, a biochemist and a nun, watched Esteban wrap his hands around a flask of the enzyme trypsin and measured its activity, climbing to match what a powerful magnetic field would produce. Then came the mice with cancer. William Bingston, a professor of research methods and a former president of the Society for Scientific Exploration, spent decades running a single ruthless experiment. He injected laboratory mice with a mammary adenocarcinoma that kills 100% of the untreated animals within about 27 days, a model so reliable that laboratories worldwide depend on its lethality. Then he had healers hold their hands around the cages. The mice lived. Beyond living, they healed completely, their tumors swelling and blackening, then dissolving away, the animals reaching full lifespan cancer-free. More than a dozen such experiments have run across 6 independent laboratories. Mice that recovered proved immune afterwards, resisting the cancer when researchers injected it a second time. Bingston trained skeptical undergraduates who believed some of it, and their hands cured the mice too. The healing showed no fall-off with distance. Water and cotton held by the healer carried the effect into cages. A 2018 paper in a peer-reviewed journal co-authored with Dean Radin documented measurable changes in gene expression inside cancer cells exposed to the method. Bingston proposes a resonant bond between living systems, a connection through which health transmits directly. Whatever the mechanism proves to be, the rumors kept dissolving across decades, across laboratories, across skeptical healers who expected failure and produced cures regardless. Something passes through the hands. The laboratories have measured its effects on wounds, on seeds, on enzymes, on tumors, on the transcription of genes in systems that hold no beliefs whatsoever. Placebo explains a great deal of what happens when one human heals another, and a substantial portion of the phenomenon lies past its reach. Sidney Weltmer sensed that truth a century before the mice, and the tradition drew from his older than every laboratory on Earth. Healing with the hands belongs to no single man, and Weltmer never claimed to invent it. He inherited a practice that runs through every culture that has ever tended its sick. In the Hawaiian Islands, the tradition carries the name Lomi Lomi, and it holds a wisdom that modern world keeps rediscovering. A Lomi Lomi practitioner begins in stillness, hands resting lightly on the body, offering a prayer and asking for whatever healing services the person before them needs. The force they work with carries the name Aloha, a word we translate as love and greeting, and which the tradition understands as the presence of divine health and divine breath moving between two beings. Underneath the technique runs the concept of mana, the spiritual power flowing through all things, gathered by the healer and given without reserve. The touch matters, and the state of one touching matters. In Japan, the practice took the name Reiki, and its central teaching corrects the most common error of the beginner. The Reiki practitioner functions as a conduit rather than the source. Universal energy moves through the healer and into the receiver, drawn by need rather than pushed by effort, which means the healer surrenders nothing of their own vitality and finishes a session refreshed, Hands rest in a sequence of positions, sometimes touching, sometimes hovering above the skin, and the practitioner holds a gentle intention while allowing the energy to seek its own destination in the body. I have met so many Reiki healers and people who have been healed by Reiki that I cannot doubt its effectiveness. The Christian scriptures Weltmer read as a boy carry the same instruction with startling directness. Believers shall lay hands on the sick, and the sick shall recover. Two who agree together in focused conviction receive what they ask. Across the Indian traditions, the practice appears as prana moving through the palms, across China as chi, among the Polynesians as mana, throughout the West as animal magnetism and vital force, and in our century as the biofield. Edgar Cayce in Trance described the mechanics with the precision of a technician. He instructed healers to rub their hands together vigorously beforehand, generating the heat and vibration that prepares the palms for their work. Just like Miyagi heals Daniel in The Karate Kid. The hands function as poles of a battery. In his description, the right carrying a positive charge and the left carrying a negative, forming a circuit through the body of the one receiving. Mechanical repetition earned his warning, and he told healers to follow their intuition, to let the hands move where the energy calls them. And he named the qualifications that matter most: a prayerful attitude, sufficient vitality, and a sincere desire to be of loving service. Every tradition arrives at the same conclusion by a different road. The hands serve as the point of contact, and the healer's inner state supplies the power. Strip the mansion and the lawsuits away, and Sidney Weltmer left behind a working method. He published it openly in a 1922 book called The Healing Hand, dividing the whole art into three instruments: the hand, the spoken word, and the written word. Touch came first, because contact establishes circuit. Weltmer taught his students to place their hands directly on the body of the sufferer, holding them still and warm, allowing the healing force to pass between two nervous systems joined at the skin. The Institute's own photographs show the hand positions, one hand resting on the chest, above the heart and lungs, while the other supports the back, precisely the polarity Cayce would later describe from trance. Speech came second, and Weltmer built it on the doctrine he called perfect agreement. He read the words of Christ in the Gospel of Matthew, that two who agree together shall receive, and he understood the healing session as the deliberate construction of that agreement. Healer and patient enter a single shared conviction. The healer speaks softly and continuously of wellness arriving, of strength returning, of trouble departing, and he speaks with absolute certainty, allowing no doubt to enter his voice or his mind. Relaxed and receptive, the patient accepts the suggestion and holds it. Two minds agreeing become one force. The written word came third, and it produced the mail business that nearly destroyed him. Weltmer and a distant patient would set an appointed hour, and at that hour, both would fix their thoughts upon the healing. The patient receiving, while the healer projected Bingston's mice healed across distance and through cotton and water, suggest the old man understood something the courts of the day dismissed. Beneath all three instruments runs the discovery Weltmer made in his own dying body, and this stands as the true center of the method. Before he touched anyone, he entered a state. He held a fixed and unshakable inner conviction of the person's wellness, seeing them whole, feeling their recovery as an accomplished fact, using the law of assumption in practice. His hands and his voice served merely to transmit that state into another human being. The healer heals by first becoming the reality he wishes to give. Every serious tradition names this same requirement. Lomi Lomi calls it aloha. Reiki calls it the open channel. Cayce called it the prayerful attitude, and a desire to be of loving service. Bingston, hunting for the mechanism in his laboratory, taught his student healers to fill their minds with rapidly cycling images of things they deeply wanted, a technique that occupies the analytical mind and dissolves all straining toward the outcome. Detachments, love, certainty, surrender, 4 words for one inner condition. Here's the secret stated plainly. Your hands carry a field. Every living thing generates one, measurable at the skin, strongest at the palms and the heart. The field responds to your inner state, organizing itself around the emotion and the conviction you hold. A body in fear broadcasts chaos, and a body in love and calm certainty broadcasts coherence. Healing occurs when a coherent field meets a disordered one, and the disordered system reorganizes toward the order it encounters. The wounded mouse healed because a coherent field surrounded its cage. Barley grew because coherence had been stored in the water. Tumors dissolved because a human being held a state of loving detachment near a cage of dying animals for an hour at a time. Consciousness organizes matter, and the hands provide the doorway where one consciousness reaches another, which means the technique matters far less than the state. A person with perfect hand positions and an anxious, doubting, straining mind transmit anxiety and doubt and strain. Consider instead the grandmother with no training resting her palms on a feverish child while flooded with love and calm certainty, who transmits love and calm certainty around it. Weltmer understood this. Every tradition understands it. The hands deliver what you are. So the whole art reduces to a single discipline. Become the state you wish to give, and then touch. This explains the strangest finding in Bingston's entire body of work. His student healers, skeptics, who considered the whole enterprise absurd, cured mice anyway. Belief in the method proved unnecessary. Their minds occupied with cycling images and detached from any outcome. They entered the required state without ever intending to, and the healing moved through them regardless of their opinions. The state does the work, and the state can be trained. So try this yourself. Use it beside your medical care rather than in place of it, and give it a real trial across several sessions before you judge the results. Begin by preparing yourself, because you serve as the instrument. Wash your hands, stand or sit comfortably, close your eyes, and slow your breathing. Drawing the air deep into your body, bring your attention into the center of your chest and breathe there for a minute or two, allowing a feeling of warmth and appreciation to gather. Call up genuine love for the person before you, for the natural world, for anything that opens your heart. This state is the medicine. Everything that follows simply delivers it. I might think of someone that I love. I might think of a powerful moment. Anything like that. Charge your hands next. Press your palms together and rub them for 20 or 30 seconds until real heat builds. Slowly draw them apart, 6 inches, then a foot, then closer again. Pay attention to the space between them. Most people will feel a pressure there, a springy resistance that I find fascinating. A tingling, a warmth, a sensation of holding something invisible and alive. Play with it, compressing it and expanding it, letting the sensation grow familiar and strong. Establish the agreement before you touch anyone. Sit with the person and tell them plainly what you intend, and invite them to want it with you. Weltmer built his entire practice on this joining of two minds toward one conviction. Speak the agreement aloud together if it feels natural. A shared and spoken intention carries more force than a private one. Then, enter the state of the healed and hold it throughout. See the person before you in perfect health, whole and vibrant and well. Feel the relief and the gratitude of their recovery as a completed fact, already accomplished, settled, and finished. Hold no anxiety about whether the healing arrives, which is why an independent healer who maybe doesn't have a personal connection to the person they're trying to heal is more effective. Sometimes if you're with somebody you deeply love and you're trying to heal them, you're also very worried about their condition, and that could make it more difficult for you to heal them. So having someone that maybe doesn't know the person as well, but carries a love in their heart is more effective. Release all straining toward the outcome. Since effort broadcasts doubt, and doubt is the one thing that closes the channel. Bingston's cycling images work precisely because they keep the mind pleasantly occupied and detached while the healing proceeds on its own. Cycle images in your mind. Cycle them. That's what seemed to work for them. Now place your hands Rest your right hand on the person's back and your left hand on the front of their body, forming a circuit through them, following the polarity Cayce described. Begin with the head or the heart rather than the trouble itself, letting the body settle and receive. Hold each position still and gentle for 5 to 15 minutes. Move when your intuition tells you to move. You may find yourself moving your hands for no reason. Following the warmth or the pull, avoiding all mechanical repetition, you may find yourself moving to the place where they are struggling or to some other place. Some practitioners hover an inch above the skin instead of touching, and the effect holds. Let the hands go where they wish to go. Trust what you feel. Speak the word while your hands rest. Softly, slowly, with complete certainty, describe the healing as an accomplished fact. Have them describe it as well. The warmth is flowing into your shoulder and the pain is dissolving. Your body knows how to heal, and healing is happening now. Strength is returning to you. Speak in the present, never in the future, and let your voice carry the same conviction that Weltmer poured into the dying. Silence works as well, provided you hold the words inwardly. Allow the energy to come through rather than from you. Picture it descending from above, entering through the crown of your head, flowing down through your heart, and out along your arms and into your hands. You give nothing of your own vitality away, so you finish refreshed rather than drained. Reiki teaches this correction, and it protects the healer. There have been times in the past when people used this technique, but they gave away their own vitality in the process. Close deliberately. Rest your hands still for a final minute. Offer silent thanks, and lift your palms away slowly. Shake your hands out. Wash them, and consciously release your connection to the person and to the outcome. Just let it go. Let the whole matter go completely. Attachment after the session works the same mischief that straining works during it. Repeat the session daily or several times a day for something serious. Grad's healer held the cages twice a day. Weltmer's patients came for 10 days. Bingston's healers worked an hour at a time across weeks. Healing accumulates. Generally, it's not going to happen in one session. Turn the same method on your own body. Since Weltmer began with himself, alone, dying of tuberculosis, in a Missouri farmhouse, rub your palms warm and lay one hand over your heart and the other over the place that troubles you. Breathe slowly into the space between and beneath your hands. Feel the heat gather and sink inward. Speak to your body with the identical certainty you would offer another person, describing the wellness arriving, the tissue mending, the strength returning. See yourself whole and feel the gratitude of a recovery already complete. Hold the hands there for 15 minutes or longer and repeat morning and night. The body listens to the mind that inhabits it, and it listens most closely at the point of touch. For someone far away, hold their image before you and treat the space between your hands as the place where their body rests. Bingston's laboratory found no fall-off with distance, and Weltmer built an empire on appointed hours across a continent. Set a time with the person you wish to help. At that hour, they receive in stillness while you rub your palms warm, hold them cupped before you, see the person perfectly well, and pour your loving certainty into the field you hold. Distance is a feature of space. Consciousness answers to a different law. Expect sensations and welcome them. Heat is the most common, sometimes startling heat, in your palms or in the receiver's body. Tingling, pulsing, a magnetic push, a heaviness, a flow of coolness, waves of emotion rising and releasing, deep sleepiness in the one receiving. Some people feel nothing at all in the early sessions while the results arrive anyway. Notice everything, judge nothing, and keep going. Above all, remember what the mice teach us. Those animals held no beliefs, and they healed anyway. Something real passes through human hands, and the traditions of every continent recognize it long before a laboratory confirmed it. You carry that same current in your palms this very evening, and it's my belief, as we enter into a new earth, that we are going to be able to heal with hands more effectively. That as we manifest quicker, we enter into a deeper connection with the unseen and Akashic worlds, that we will be able to heal with hands. And so forget what we've learned in the past. Forget the idea that in the past it may not have worked. I believe we're moving into an era where this will change. Only time will tell us. But you carry that current. It waits behind your ribs in the warmth of your chest, ready to move the moment you gather your love, steady your certainty, and reach out and touch another living being. So we come to the end of the quiet disappearance of a man who once commanded a healing empire. Sidney Weltmer died on the 6th of December, 1930, at the age of 72, in the same Missouri town his strange gift had transformed. His son Ernest tried to carry the Institute forward, but the founder had been its true engine, and the Great Depression closed its hands around the country. The Institute shut its doors in 1933. The grand 17-room mansion, the beating heart of the whole phenomenon, passed through other uses, became a funeral home, and was finally torn down in the opening years of our own century, demolished to clear a lot, never granted the protection of history. Today almost nothing marks the spot. The name Sidney Weltmer has faded almost entirely from memory. He appears now as a curious footnote, a turn of the century oddity, a faintly comical figure, yet the footnote conceals a man who genuinely mattered. And the reason he came to me is how amazing his writing was, how detailed his books were, the incredible illustrations that were provided, the detailed medical knowledge in these books. I could not deny how powerful and effective. Somebody really attempted to take this, turn it into a science, and transmit it. Yes, he was trying to make money. There was nothing wrong with that. He forced the Supreme Court to acknowledge the healing power of the mind. He built a working monument. He's an example, with all the people that he did heal, that there's something to this. And we may be able to learn more because he treated it like a science. The deepest lesson of his life points straight at yours. That power Sidney Weltmer sold from a Missouri mansion was never truly housed in his hands at all. It lived in the minds of the people who climbed down from those trains, already half convinced that they would walk again, breathe freely, and there may have been more going on. The healer summoned the belief, and the belief did the work. The healer was actively using healing modalities that we are slowly going to learn more and more about today. Now, one person may be able to heal better than another, and that's because the state that they are in and their belief and connecting to the divine in each case is going to be different. It's almost impossible to study scientifically. One person can come along and heal people in such amazing ways. Do not discount this. There is something to it. It is the standing birthright of every human mind, including yours. Your convictions are shaping your body and your circumstances, writing themselves quietly into your health. Sidney Weltmer understood that truth a century before, and his process, his examples, are a place for us to look to learn more about this science. I recommend that you study Reiki if you have the ability to. If you know somebody that's teaching Reiki or utilizes Reiki, to me, this is one of the most profound movements. There are some people that are master Reiki practitioners that are truly amazing. There are people that are Lomi Lomi practitioners. All of it is important. And I believe that we are going to fine-tune this process. Science will allow us to understand the delicate use of different energies, and some people will be able to channel specific energies into healing. And I believe that that's the secret. Don't abandon this. This is not just about placebo. I wanted to talk about Sidney Weltmer because he's a fascinating phenomenon in history, but it's so much more than that. You have the power to heal with your hands. And hopefully you can use some of these techniques. Put it in the comments if you try any of this out. If you've ever have seen or experienced healing with hands. You might be surprised by the number of people that have experienced healing. Please talk about it. I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and let me know. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. I'd love to invite you to join my Reality Revolution community. You can find it at school.com, skool.com/Reality Revolution, where we have weekly group coaching sessions and exclusive content you can't find anywhere else. And I most assuredly will go deeper on healing hands techniques in my group. I'm sending all my love and all my light to everyone listening. and welcome to the Reality Revolution. Hey, welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm Brian Scott. Over the last year, I've had the honor of hosting some amazing live in-person events, something I never thought that I would do. And I have grown and changed so much in these experiences. The opportunity to meet so many of you, to shake your hand, to hug you, to hear your stories, to watch the way that you grow, to see your changes, to get to know you. So many of you have followed my channel. It's been such an exciting experience. So when we were thinking about our next event, we decided we wanted to do something a little different. So many of you have found me through my teachings on money, on large sums of money, on the affirmations that I use. And so we brainstormed and came together with an amazing event. Over 3 days, we've planned out some of the most incredible meditative techniques, exercises, and teachings that I have ever done. 9 immersive meditations, all designed to shift you into the reality where large sums of money come to you easily and quickly. There is nothing I want more than for you to experience absolute prosperity. I want you to live a life where you are free to do what you want when you want. I want you to be able to choose when you wake up, when you go to sleep. I want you to lead a business that empowers you, that fulfills you. I want you to live a life where you choose where you live. You live in your dream home. You travel the world. I want all of this for you, and it's available to you. I believe when we come together at these events, magic happens. And so I want to have the opportunity to become a catalyst for you, to join me for 3 days so that we can manifest the most incredible life for you, one that makes you incredibly prosperous, where you tune into infinite streams of money. You walk through storms of money all around you. You experience it in every way, shape, and form. Large sums of money are coming to you. Join me in Austin on September 18th through the 20th at the Hyatt Regency. You can find the link in the description at www.brianscottlive.com/Austin-2026.